Hey, this is Robot here, Scooter West, Vespa Motorsport. Here we got my friend Alberto's, I think it's a 2016 GTS 300 ABS equipped model. He's got I think it's 9,650 miles, like around 15,000 kilometers. We're going to do the scheduled service as per with the Piaggio recommendations. At 9,000 miles, the only recommended replacement item is the drive belt. Alberto's done all the services, or we've done them together on the scooter. We've done the 3,000 mile service, which is a simple checkup. We've done the 6,000 mile service, spark plug, engine oil, inspect and clean the transmission, replace the rollers. He's also done the first service, which comes at 1,000 kilometers or 625 miles. So he hasn't skipped any of the services. So we just need to do the scheduled service based on the mileage of the scooter. He purchased it about 15 months ago, a year and 3 months or whatever that is. And so he's racking up good miles on it. And in your owner's manual, there's the scheduled service. I've summarized it on this, like, I don't know, I did it in Excel spreadsheet. But anytime any of the techs do services on any of the Vespas, I have like a summarized service, much like this. And you could see at the first service, which is 625 miles or 1,000 kilometers, change the engine oil, you change the oil filter, you inspect the coolant level, and that's done on every single interval. You want to inspect the coolant level and top it off if needed. Final drive oil is changed at the first service, is 625 miles, and thereafter it's at 12,000 miles. Engine oil is recommended from the factory to be changed every 6,000 miles thereafter. So 6,000, 12,000, 18,000, and so on. You can kind of see it just repeats itself. I have a lot of customers that opt to change the oil every 3,000. Say they use the scooter on the highway, or it's been a long interval where they just haven't changed the oil. You know, it's been over a year or something. Then I would recommend changing the oil at the 3,000, 9,000, and so on. Gear oil, like I said, it's just lubricating gears, so there's only 12,000 miles that you need to change that. Spark plugs change every 6,000 miles on any of the 250 and 300 models. Inspect the spark plug wire and coil as well. One thing with the spark plug caps is, since they're on the motor that vibrates and takes all the suspension motion, they tend to rattle apart over time. So it's definitely important that you inspect the spark plug cap and make sure it has a tight fit on the spark plug. You want to catch it before you hit a bump on the highway and it pops the spark plug cap off. You know, that's the least convenient time for your spark plug cap to fail. Replace a simple spark plug cap. Sometimes if you're doing a long trip, I would just start with a fresh spark plug cap. The one that a lot of people don't understand, it's a complicated repair, is the valve adjustment. And that occurs every 12,000 miles on this model. So it's 12, 24, 36. We're not quite there. Not really any reason to do it early. You can see I have a valve adjustment video that shows the cylinder head out of the motor and talks about the steps you need to take to do the valve adjustment. Air filter, it's a foam element, so technically it can be cleaned. I find at 6,000 miles, it's usually pretty clean unless you're riding it on the dirt quite a bit. And at 12,000 miles, Piaggio suggests that you clean at that time, but oftentimes I replace it. It's very inexpensive for a pre-oiled filter from Piaggio. We also have the Malossi filter available. Getting to the transmission, so pretty much all of these areas are related, or all these checks are related to transmission. The one thing with these constant velocity transmissions that are belt driven, they do need service. They're not like a car transmission where you change the fluid after 100,000 miles. Unfortunately, it's found on most new modern scooters is this style transmission, and have specific service intervals to keep them operating at their peak performance. So the Variator rollers, which are, you'll see them when I get to the 9,000 mile service, they've already been checked at 6,000, so there's probably no need to replace them. But Piaggio recommends you replace them every 6,000 miles. And I will admit they do last a little longer than that. But you know, if we're going to stick to the Piaggio recommendations, that's what they suggest on it. And you look for flat spots and all that. I'll get to that when we get to the actual job. Dry belt, important. That's replaced every 9,000 miles, so 9, 18, 27. I've seen them last longer, but you know, it's pretty much once you're going past 9,000 miles, you go on like a 500-mile trip, you're asking for it. You don't know, you know, the belt's past its service life of 9,000 miles, 15,000 kilometers. Definitely something you don't want to neglect. I mean, I see customers just neglect it and they just wait till it breaks. It's kind of just sloppy. Why not just spend a little extra and service it as per what the engineers at Piaggio stated, and then you just don't have problems with the bike. Seems like the more logical thing. And I know a lot of customers, yeah, they're not really, they call in, they're just like, I need an oil change, and they just think they need an oil change. Sometimes they're not even at a specific mileage interval or year interval, you know, as the recommendations of Piaggio. But that's, you know, I would definitely recommend servicing as per what's in the owner's manual. And you tend to have a scooter that's going to last longer and have less problems, you know, over the life. Of course, you're going to have other service requirements such as the tires and brakes. You may have a coolant leak or some other issues, but if you keep up on the service, you're going to have less problems. And you know, service, you know, there's a lot of self-service stuff you need to stick to every 100, 200 miles, such as checking your air pressure, checking the coolant level on your own, you know, to prevent problems from happening. The way we sell a lot of this stuff, do the services yourself on our website, we have various service kits. You know, a service kit for doing the oil change, a service kit for doing the gearbox oil. There's a belt service kit, and we sell both a standard one that doesn't include the tools, and then there's a deluxe service kit. And that's all the Piaggio and Vespa products. We have a part number that, you know, rounds up all the parts you'll need to successfully do the service on your Vespa or Piaggio product. But we're going to jump right into it. A lot of these other checks beyond the transmission ones are, you know, inspect the brake levels, inspect the coolant, check the time, set the time. This is all for my technicians. I want them to go through, you know, each one of these steps, throttle free play, and just go through it. And if you look at some of I think I have a 12,000 mile service video, and that pretty much almost covers everything, you know, that's needed on these scooters. And that's one of my previous videos I did maybe a couple of years ago. I don't remember. I've been doing videos for a while. But this is the 9,000 mile. It's just kind of pretty much just summarizing doing the belt replacement and some other checks. All right, so I'm going to jump into doing the service. First thing I always do is check the tire pressure. Alberto's let me know that the rear tire has a slow leak or something because he's filling it up every couple days. So I'm going to get my air pressure meter here. Come on, hose. If I can get the hose to... All right. Unfortunately, we're in the United States, so we use PSI. Front's supposed to be about 26 PSI, which I think is like 1.75 bar or something like that. If I'm wrong, somebody can correct me in the comments. So 22s. And go a little higher. There we go. Not too low. If it had 10 in it, I would be worried about it. Go to the rear. This is stuff you just check. If you're doing your own services, ooh, he has 46 in there, so he's topped it off quite a bit. That's a lot more pressure than we need. But I'm gonna find where the leak is and plug that, and I'll show that in the video. It's not normal practice to be plugging tires on motorcycles and scooters, but I've been riding for several years. I've tested out different ways to do it. I've patched inner tubes. I was like avid off-road guy for a long time, so I was real accustomed to patching inner tubes all the time on my dirt bikes and all that stuff, on the side of the trail, all that. So it's kind of acceptable if you got to, for budget reasons or something, you want to make a little bit more life on the tire, there is safe ways to plug a tire. Obviously, if there's a nail sticking out of the sidewall, there's nothing you can do about it. Or if the tire is on the cusp of being worn, it's definitely not a good idea to repair it unless you're on the roadside and need to get somewhere. Standard practice is to replace a tire when there's some type of puncture in it causing a leak. And don't ever overlook the rubber stem. You know, a lot of people don't replace those. In the car industry, it's standard you replace those every time if they're a rubber stem, and we do the same with the rubber stems on these Vespas. So a lot of times they tend to rot and you end up with a leak from them or the valve core. I already checked all the lights. You kind of just make sure all the lights work, including the license plate light, tail light. There's two separate bulbs in the tail light. I already checked all that stuff. I think I had a video that showed that. Same with the battery. Make sure the battery terminals are tight. That's a common problem with these. You want to go in there and tighten the battery terminals. I think I had a video a couple months ago that showed all the basic checks you should be doing on a Vespa, and it covers that. All right, I'm going to jump right into the belt service. We already know the scooter runs fine. He's been using it regularly. He's done all the other services. If he skipped a service or two, then I would probably be going backwards and doing the remainders of those services that were missed. I'm going to check the oil. And I think it's going to be a little bit overfilled. Yeah, that's a little bit overfilled. The safe level should be right at that first little mark there. So go ahead and draw some of the oil out just to, I'm guessing I got to pull at least 200 cc's out of it. So this is a big syringe. We don't sell a syringe this size, but I use them in the service. There's 200 cc's pulled out. And we'll see how the oil level looks after that. So it's on a level ground. They always tend to read just a slightly higher when they're hot. This bike, I think, came off the highway maybe a half hour ago or something. So it's still pretty warm. There you go. Now that's the acceptable level. It's just slightly above the high mark, and that's fine. If it shows up dry coming out, if it looks like this, you got a problem. You want to top it off until you bring it up to that mark there. And again, this being the 9,000 mile service, the oil still looks really clean. It's like I suggested, technically you only need to change it every 6,000 miles, but if you're using the scooter at highway speeds all the time, or even the opposite, low speeds over a long period of time, like a year, it'd just be a good idea to change the engine oil. Got to get this side skirt off, give us better access. So we got a single T25 Torex, since it's a newer scooter, could be a Phillips. And behind here is the and I kind of started from the rear, then pulled this towards the front. See those two hooks kind of hook in those slots there. These three pegs go into these rubber bits right here. Pretty simple design, it works pretty well. Get that out of the way. I'm going to go up just a little bit. And left the dipstick out because it needs to be out when we take the belt cover off, but I'm going to pull the belt case filter off just to inspect and clean it. The foam element, you do not oil it like you do with the main air filter is an oiled foam element. This is a dry foam element. The reason I put that dipstick back in there is I just didn't want this stuff going into the and you could blow this off, and I'll blow it off with air. I don't have compressed air right now, but leave the dipstick out. And the airbox, there's a single Phillips in the front. This is the longer screw. This would also be the time if you need to get access to the air filter, you could do that. And there's some fasteners up there hidden as well. And I think some of my other videos kind of cover how to service the air filter. So this is the long Phillips screw. And somebody at Piaggio put 2 washers on there. It only needs 1. So a star washer and a flat washer. 2 Torxes right there. Another one there. So get a needle nose. There's that style fastener, a little shorter than the other screws. And they're both identical. And the only reason you need to do this, I mean, I think it is possible to get the belt case off without the filter loose, but just it's a difficult job. You might as well. So I just like kind of derailed the airbox to make the job much easier. And you gotta get this little cover off. You could use anything to pry it off carefully. Just like you could get a flat blade screwdriver, would probably be the best tool. And that's held with those 3 rubber little guys right there. 2 ways to do this. If you have an impact, you could use an impact to zip it off. Definitely don't want to tighten it with impact. If you don't have an impact, you could use I think it's Tool ETC. It's like the clutch holder that's used on most Vespas. And you see when those pegs are in there, you can crack it loose. And I used a pretty long wrench, to do that. You can see it needs a little bit of effort to break free. But if you have an impact that's strong enough to zip it off, that would work just as well. And in order to get the job done quickly, there's a washer there. And I have 2 techniques of getting the belt cover fasteners off, 11 of them or whatever, or 10 or whatever it is. You could use like a T-handle. And the cool thing is you could spin them really fast. And that's a quick way to get them off with a hand tool. Using a ratchet and screwing with that, it's like, I don't know, it takes too much time. You got a ground strap here. Giving up, I'm already using the electric impact. One thing is you got to make sure you're positively on the fastener with the impact. If you get off, you end up with the socket spinning around, it makes a mess of the fasteners. So that one's got the bracket for the hose. And this isn't a critical assembly, so there's not really any order you needed to take it off. So that was a little screw up right there. Didn't get it all the way on. And under here, you got a bracket that holds the brake cable or brake hose, brake cable on some of the models. This is your vent for your gearbox oil and another bracket. And for the most part, these are all 30mm long fasteners. On some models, they'll use a 35mm fastener down here for some reason. It's all, this one's got the 35mm one. They used it on that bracket there. And I've seen the 35mm used there sometimes and the 35mm used on this one. Just because it's got a little extra thickness from those the little brackets and stuff on it. This is the same thing here. On the 2015 and later, they went to a little bit thicker bracket, and that's why they went to that 35mm fastener. Pretty easy to not notice that. And one thing is these belt covers, even though all the fasteners are off, they tend not to want to pop off. And 2 ways you can go about getting that off. This is a fancy tool that not too many people, home mechanics have. It's called a slide hammer. It's quite a small one. But the idea is all these little tabs here, you could tap with a hammer behind, and same with this. Once you get it mostly off, you could just jiggle it. Or you could just use something like this, and this does the job a little easier, but a hammer works just as well. And I'll tell you, on older bikes, just with the galvanic corrosion, because there's like little steel pegs on these, those tend to want to rust into those, so it will be even more difficult on an older scooter. Always want to check this bearing, make sure it turns smooth. It has a real smooth feel to it. You could spin it, makes very little noise, so that bearing's in good shape. Put the belt cover aside, spin this. Doesn't need to spin all that nice, but as long as it doesn't have free play or make bad noises, you're okay with it. You got your clutch bell, that comes right off. You see all that clutch dust in there? We're gonna clean all that out. You got your clutch shoes. I would say they have about 2.5 millimeters remaining on them. When they're new, they're like 3.5 or 4 millimeters. So it's something to keep in mind. When that's down to the last millimeter of thickness, like 1/16 of an inch, it may be just a good idea to replace it. Oftentimes you hear a lot of like metallic noise from these scooters when they get high miles. It's usually this metal black backplate. There's no free play in this, but once there's free play in it, it doesn't generally mean that your clutch is worn out, but it's that plate is loose on the back of the clutch, and it just tends to be a little bit on the noisy side. Again, you could cheat and put an impact on this. I'm going to use the Bizzetti tool we sell. Part number on this is tool GTS V, Variator holder. And no sense in me showing you the Piaggio tool. The Piaggio tool, it works a little bit better, but it costs substantially more. It's like quite a bit more. And the whole idea of this tool is it lines up with that fastener right there. So you put the screw through that spacer. I was turning the engine over by hand, which is not all that difficult. And we'll go ahead and put this fastener in there. So the whole idea is this is what, and I'm not going to use a tool on that, just tighten that by hand, and that's tight enough to hold it in place. And now we can break the center nut. Both this and this, you can use a 19 millimeter socket, and you could use an extension on it. The one thing is you got to break about 60 foot-pounds of torque on this. So you can see that has quite a bit holding it down. So order, you got a nut. Get the tool out of the way. You got this Belleville washer, which is like a spring washer. It's got a special shape. You can see the wear pattern on where the nut tightens down on it. If you're afraid you're not going to put it, you could write the word outside, which I think I illustrate in some other videos. Then you got this thinner washer here. This Variator pulley pulls right off. There's another washer right here. And now this whole assembly will come off with the belt. And we can measure this belt, but it's a good idea to change the belt at the 9,000 mile service. Even if it doesn't have cracking, you know, the wear on it, it's just past its service life, regardless of how it looks, you know, and it's a good idea to change it based on mileage. But if I was inspecting the belt at some other mileage, I would look for cracks on the inside. I've seen belts where some of the teeth are missing on it. You can measure the width. If it's under 20 millimeters, it's beyond its service life. But this belt's trash at this point. Just gonna put a new belt in there, so. Variator, the center box comes out. Everything's a little warm right now. And then I kind of see how I'm tipping that. And the reason I do that is so I don't lose the rollers like I did right there with one rolling back here, so. And rollers, they're all in pretty good shape. You know what? There's some flat spots in them. I suspect we didn't change them at 6,000 miles on this bike, like I suggested. So I think I'm going to go ahead and put new rollers in there, and you can see there's a flat spot. And one thing on the 300, the OEM rollers are kind of this like burgundy color. If it's a 250, it's going to have green colored rollers, or the original equipment rollers in it. So go ahead and change those out. And we'll probably change these out as well. Very inexpensive. These are the little shoes that slide on these little pegs. A lot of times you look on much higher miles, some of this will be worn out. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of free play in this. This is completely acceptable at 9,000 miles. The belt hasn't worn any grooves in here. Yeah, I can run my hand. I can just barely feel a groove on the very outside edge and on the inside edge. That's fairly normal. There is a specification for what the wear is on it, listed in the service book, but I tend to just do it by feel. Or if there's a performance problem with the scooter, it's a good idea to maybe change them. So we're gonna just scuff these up with sandpaper and get the scooter back together with new dry belt and rollers. We'll clean the clutch. So I'm going to summarize the parts that are in the transmission. You got the cover, first thing we took off. You got the fixed half drive pulley, as they call it. It's the one part of the variator that's fixed to the crankshaft. It doesn't move. You got a nut. You have the locking washer. You have a flat washer. This all goes on the outside like that. In between the variator boss and this fixed half, you have that washer, the shim washer. In some applications, when we do performance tuning, I'll put 2 of them in there to essentially lower the gear ratio a little bit and eliminate belt rub with certain variator setups. You got the boss that goes in between, and that's what this variator slides on. So this variator is a movable part. So sometimes they call this drive pulley movable half is another name for this variator. You have the rollers. This is the OEM roller. I'm going to replace it with a different style roller, and I'll talk about those in a moment. This is the standard roller, and you can see it's got 2 different looks. Nearly every variator I've seen that has a roller that has a plastic on one side and the metal exposed on the other side, it's always the metal is facing towards the clockwise. So just remember like metal clockwise or open clockwise, because it's a more open shape. I just think open clockwise, so it goes like that. If you put it another way, the metal will work its way out and it usually ends up tearing up the variator. You can't do that. There's some variator weights, they look identical left, on each side, and you can just put those in either way. These are the slide shoe bushings. It's a good idea just to replace them every time. They're very inexpensive, and as the variator wears, it tends to eat those things up, and you end up with a noisier transmission. I'm going to replace these stock 13.9 rollers that are found on the any stock 300 Vespa. I'm going to replace them with a 13 gram, so it's just slightly lighter. The 300s are more of a torque engine. If you put really light rollers, it just ends up making a lot of noise. It doesn't really go any faster except for up the hills. 13 grams works pretty good with a completely stock engine setup. So, if you want to just change something around a little bit, play with something a little lighter, your mileage is just going to go down just ever so slightly. 13 grams is a good idea. These Dr. Pulley, the size of these is 21 by 17. 21 millimeters diameter, 17 wide, and it's a drop-in replacement for the stock variators in a stock variator. Of course, there's complete variator kits from different manufacturers that kind of change the curve of how the power is delivered. My preference is just the stock variators. They tend to last the longest for at least the kind of riding I do with my GTS. It's kind of a touring setup, and I have my touring bike. My touring GTS has got the Melosi kit and all that stuff, but I have a stock variator in there with Dr. Pulley weights in it. Out of all the brands, Dr. Pulleys tend to last about as long as the stock weights. Some people claim they last longer. There's other brands like Polini and Melosi weights. They tend to last not quite as long as stock weights, just based on the material they're made from. These have more material on them, so they tend to wear a little bit longer. But the stock ones, they're made of some material that holds up quite well. So if push came to shove and you had to reuse these, they would still be acceptable. But anytime I see some flat spots, I'm in the transmission just to replace the stuff. It's not that expensive stuff. This is called the ramp plate, and this is what the rollers, they pretty much slide on it. Even though they do call it a roller, they do rotate a little bit on there, but this is the ramp that they slide up and down. I have the brand new dry belt. This is an OEM dry belt. You can see there's an arrow on it, indicates the direction. I find the OEM dry belt tends to wear the best out of all of them. There's other brands of dry belts that they may or may not be a little bit better than the stock ones, but I don't know. In most cases, the other brand belts don't quite last as long, or I've seen them break in some instances before the service interval. So I tend to like to stick with the stock belt. Here you got the clutch drum, and that's with these 3 shoes. There's springs holding these back, and as the engine RPMs builds, or the speed builds, these shoes come out and make contact to that. And you can see they leave behind dust, and that tends to cause like chatter at low speeds. So every time you have this apart, you'll clean the dust out, we'll clean all these parts and deglaze all this, scuff up the surfaces. In another video, I show how to overhaul this whole driven pulley. At 9,000 miles, it's not something you need to worry about. There are some bearings in here, you make sure they turn free. Essentially, this driven pulley, the front pulley is called the dry pulley, this is the driven pulley. And this movable half is spring loaded, and it's on like a greased set of pins that kind of has a cam action to it. And that spring's specifically calibrated to put a specific load on the variator. So the weights, as they move this, it overcomes the spring tension, and that's just how you change the theoretic gear ratios of this transmission based on the load, the engine speed. I'm not going to go into all the details. If you're into tuning, a lot of times you just got to play with it, figure it out, what you need. Sometimes you change the springs because you're making more power, but most of the time you just change the variator weights, and that can give you some little changes, in how the power is delivered. I'm going to go pull all these parts. I'm going to clean them in a parts washer, so we'll do that real quick. I'm going to clean all these parts in the parts washer. This is like a water-based cleaning solution. It's the state of California, so there's no solvent here. I don't know. It's like the solvent stuff works. This works just as well. If you're doing this at home, there's stuff called brake clean. It's like in a spray can, and that would work adequate for cleaning all these parts. One thing, I don't really like getting this assembly wet because there's bearings, and these shoes tend to absorb some of the fluid. So I'm mostly just going to blow this off. So I'm going to clean all the other parts. Nothing special. All right, so I'm going to show you the parts that you want to take, 80 or 100 grit sandpaper, and you just want to deglaze them. The whole idea of deglazing everything is to kind of restore the surface so everything, the friction surfaces of the belt and the clutch, so a little dirt in there, have a even surface to bite against, essentially. And if you don't do this, sometimes that's why you get a chatter. I don't know if you've ridden enough scooters, you'll see as the transmission wears, it's not very smooth, the engagement, especially when you're taking off from a stop. When you do all these steps, to deglaze all this stuff, it tends to kind of restore the scooter to a like new kind of, whatever smoothness, especially at the takeoff from a stop. So I'm not taking a bunch of material. I'm just taking off the glazed surface on it. Anytime you do a new belt, you want to definitely get this. Put a little swirl in there. Just take the gloss off the aluminum. Sometimes if you don't do this, I've found the belt will slip for a little bit until it really seats into the surface, because there's some uneven surfaces that the old belt is kind of, like I said, those grooves and stuff. The new belt, it's got to work a little bit of time to seat into these surfaces, but it kind of speeds it up if you take the glaze off it. So you can just see they kind of got that. Let's blow the brake dust off these things. All right, we're going to go ahead and install the Dr. Pulley weights, and much like the original weights, they have an open side and a closed side, and this little groove is what faces straight up and down on those. So, you know, you can't put it in the other way because they don't quite sit in there. I mean, I've heard of people doing that, and then they wonder why the scooter kind of has really poor performance and drag. So, pretty simple. You just look for the screw and don't drop them on the ground. And those flat surfaces are what ride against this ramp plate here. Pop these in. You can see they will not fit that direction. You have to put these little shoes like this. Sometimes if it's a newer Variator, this won't slide up and down very good, and you may have to file the inside or use some sandpaper. So now I'm holding that just like this so it doesn't fall apart. And go ahead and slide that in. And I'm holding it like a pancake. Just slide it right on the splines. Take this little boss. You see the little bit rustier side usually is the side that goes on the inside. It doesn't really matter, it's symmetrical. Before I put the driven pulley, there's a needle bearing in here and also guides. You could take a small amount of grease and just pack it into that needle bearing. And the idea of this needle bearing is when the clutch is freewheeling and not locked up to the shaft, it spins on this bearing. So if you hear noise when the scooter's at idle, that's abnormal. It may be the bearings in this driven pulley. That's oftentimes the noises that you hear. You know, the belt cover has a support bearing. Sometimes those wear out. I'll replace those. This is your dry belt. And you want to have the arrows point towards the front of the scooter because that's the direction these pulleys turn. So the arrows pointing to my left. This is kind of the natural state of the belt. Clean hands. See, I'm kind of steering this like a steering wheel. Believe me, the big ones are much harder to do, but you can see the belt dropped into the groove. And I just hold it like this, arrow, and go ahead and slide this onto the pulley shaft. Don't worry if the belt's, you know, or whatever is situated right there. Get all your hardware. Put that shim washer. Put your Variator. Put your belt drum on. This washer, the thin washer with the small hole, and this. It does not go this way. You can see it kind of doesn't sit right if you try to put it on the other way. It sits nice when it's that direction. Oftentimes I put a small dab of Loctite. Doesn't need much. It's, you know, originally from the factory they never put Loctite, but it's just a preventive measure that I tend to do. You know, if it's torqued to the correct specification, which is like about 62 foot-pounds, you won't have any issues with it. Take your Variator tool, and you got to line that up. You can see I rotated the pulley to get that all lined up. So again, just hand tie is all you need. Get a torque wrench. You don't necessarily need something this fancy. $19mm socket. And I'll just leave it on 80 foot-pounds, but we'll watch the display. Every torque wrench has a different way of setting it. Probably the simplest torque wrench are just the bar torque wrenches where you watch the needle, and that's perfectly adequate for a job like this. So I'm watching the gauge. There you go, hit 63 was the peak. That's good. So anywhere from, I don't know, 60, 65, don't go any higher. 65, you'll be fine. So. Another step that I make all the techs that work here, any critical fasteners, you put an indicator that was torqued. And if you notice on these scooters, they have, you know, up here, this is from the factory, they do the exact same thing. They torque stripe all these fasteners. So there's somebody QCing the bike as somebody's torquing all these fasteners. These are mostly, you know, they're not like I don't know, there's a lot of hand assembly. The only robotics they really have at the factory, I've seen the factory run, is mostly for the assembly of these frames, all the spot welding and handling of these frames going down assembly line. But for the most part, these scooters are pretty hand assembled. You know, the quantities don't justify a full, robotic assembly line like you do with a popular car. You know, some car models they sell, over 150,000 a year. So everything's all in there. Don't need to do anything with anything else. Get the belt cover on. Make sure all your brackets, your ground straps out of the way. Go ahead and get all the screws back in. This is important. Make sure that little strap for your coolant hose. I'll put the 35mm long screw in that one. That's where it came out. Ground strap. Some models don't have this, but most do. And the rest of the fasteners are 30s. And I usually tend to just want to pop them all in, all the way around. And now we're down to these little straps. So this little guy gets the screw, and then the little clamp that holds the cable. And Scott can speed this up. Don't need to have a torque wrench, just to show you. I'm kind of alternating between the fasteners, and right now I'm just going between the fasteners and spin them until they stop. And using hand tools, it takes you longer sometimes, but you have a little better feel. But sometimes when you got to get a job done, you have many jobs, sometimes impacts make more sense. And I would not impact these on these, maybe if you started the fasteners in there, you could get away with that. But you kind of, unless you really know the impact gun. And I'm just gonna give them all little torque, just like that, back and forth. Make sure they all. And if you want to get crazy, torque them to 7.2 foot-pounds, 10 Newton meters. If you really wanted to, just kind of a standard torque for 6mm fastener. All right, put the washer in here. I'll show you a trick to get this nut on. I've never bothered with Loctite on it. I've never had one of these come loose. Turn the tire backwards, and now it's bottomed out. So I was turning the tire backwards. Got this. Pop the tool in there. Tool ETC, I think it is. It's the clutch holding tool. It just engages into holes that are in the clutch. I'm gonna torque this to 45 foot-pounds. You can even see I wrote it on there at some point. There you go. Done. Pop this on there. While we're at it, let's check the gear oil. I don't need to change it 9,000 miles, but 12,000 miles I will be changing it. Clean dipstick off. Scooter's on the center stand and on a level surface, being on this lift. Thread it all the way back in, back it off, and that's about the high mark. The dot is the actual level, and high would be no higher than this mark here, and low is if it's right on the tip. So the specific level is right at the dot for this model. Some models use the higher marks, but this is just right at the dot. And I'm not worried about it just being slightly high. It should be good. So, lined up the things and the bosses for the fasteners for the airbox. Again, they got that star washer and the flat washer. Oftentimes those are lost. And this one's a Phillips for some reason. Some models, those are all Phillips, just depends. Grabs one more tool. And I find you don't want to use an impact for these, but electric screwdriver is kind of nice because sometimes you gotta move things around until you can get them to engage. So that one started. This clutch, again, if you were wanting to get picky with this, I don't know, something like 4 or 5 foot-pounds, nothing that critical, just turn it with a screwdriver pretty tight because they are large screws. air filter. This is a belt case air filter. This is all you gotta do. You can wash it out with soapy water. Carefully pop the filter in. Make sure you don't drop anything down there. If you're worried about dropping something in there, always shove a rag in there or something. These two screws, you don't want to over tighten them because they do go into plastic here. Kind of clean everything. This would be the time, say if you're doing an oil change in conjunction with the belt service, you'd fill the motor. Sometimes it's easier to fill the motor before you even put the belt cover. You know, put the 1.2 liters of oil in here, 1.3 liters around that, before you even put the thing. And I'm just getting my fingerprints off this. There you go. So first thing you want to do is when you take it on a test ride, kind of, you know your own bike if you're doing a service like this. So it's always good to do a test ride before you do any type of work on your scooter. Kind of have a feel, a baseline feel for how the scooter feels, and it should feel better based on everything was a little dry and crusty in there. Earlier in this video, I suggested that Alberto did the 6K, and after seeing the rollers, I have to look at the computer. I don't know. I don't think the 6K was completed, actually. I remember him doing an oil change on it, though. So put the nut back in, it's got an accessory floor mat on there, so put the single Torex. And that pretty much concludes that. If you want to look at the 9K service, we inspected, we drained off the overfilled oil. I checked the coolant level and it was fine. It was between the low and high mark. You could see on my video that covers kind of all the basic checks. We ended up replacing the Variator rollers, so we did that. Dry belt we clean. They say clean the air filter, and that was kind of an indication. I don't think this was done at 6K, so we essentially checked all this stuff. We cleaned the dry pulley, driven pulley. It's kind of, you do that every time, even though it's not on the thing. Looked at the brake pads. You could peek through there, and that's covered on another video. They all look fine, both front and rear. 9,000 miles, unless it's a city bike, they generally last. Brake fluid level, you got to pull the little reservoirs off that. I'll set the clock time. Pressure, we took out some air in the rear tire and looked for a leak. Couldn't find the leak. All the lights worked. Muffler and header joint, it's nice and quiet when the scooter's running. And I haven't done this, but we'll do a test ride and wipe down the scooter before we would deliver it to a customer. Belt was replaced, and we would note the condition and transfer that to the repair order for a customer. If you order any of our service kits, you can always ask one of the sales representatives in our parts department for the checklist. It's kind of nice. You can write on this. It's a little bigger. The owner's manual with the scooter is pretty small, and it's not, I think the checklist the service schedule, excuse me, spans between 2 or 3 pages on it, if I recall. That pretty much concludes the 9K service, which is, I call the belt service. Do it every 9,000 miles on any of the GTSs, 250s, 300s, and all that fun stuff. See you guys next time.